My name is Stella. I am 33 years old and I work as a data analyst director in Seattle. My husband found out I was pregnant and kicked me out into the pouring rain, claiming the child could not possibly be his. He locked my credit cards and laughed in my face while his pregnant mistress stepped out of our guest bedroom. He thought he had left me with absolutely nothing. What he did not know was that a phone call from a high-powered attorney was about to unlock a $35 million secret left by my late first husband. A secret that required this exact pregnancy to destroy my current husband entirely. Before I share how I turned my lowest moment into the ultimate revenge, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to watch an arrogant man lose everything because he underestimated the wrong woman. It was a Tuesday evening in November. The Seattle rain was lashing against the windows of our upscale suburban home. I had spent the afternoon walking around in pure disbelief. After weeks of feeling exhausted, I had finally taken a test. 2 solid pink lines stared back at me. I took 3 more just to be absolutely certain. They all showed the exact same undeniable result. I was going to be a mother. This was a miracle I had stopped hoping for. My first husband, Harrison, passed away early last year. Losing him shattered my world. When I met Donovan a few months later, he seemed like the perfect person to help me pick up the pieces. He was 35, a vice president at a prestigious hedge fund, and he knew exactly what to say to make me feel safe again. We married quickly. Our marriage had been tense lately. Donovan was obsessed with appearances and increasingly controlling with our finances, despite the fact that I earned a substantial 6-figure salary myself. But I convinced myself that a baby would change everything. I thought this child would bridge the growing distance between us. I spent an hour preparing his favorite dinner. I placed the 4 positive pregnancy tests in a small velvet jewelry box and set it next to his wine glass on the granite kitchen island. I was trembling with excitement. When Donovan finally walked through the door, he did not even look at me. He tossed his custom-tailored suit jacket over a chair and loosened his silk tie with a heavy sigh. He complained about his clients. He complained about the traffic. I stood waiting. He poured himself a glass of wine and paused when he saw the velvet box. He looked at me with a raised eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. "What is this?" he asked, picking up the box. "An early anniversary present? Or did you finally buy those diamond earrings you have been hinting about?" "Just open it," I whispered, tears already welling up in my eyes. I watched his face closely, waiting for the confusion to melt into surprise and then joy. He flipped the lid open. He stared at the 4 plastic sticks resting on the velvet cushion. The silence in the kitchen dragged on for 10 agonizing seconds. His reaction was not at all what I expected. He did not drop the box. He slowly closed the box, set it down, and laughed. It was a cold, hollow sound that sent a chill straight down my spine. I stepped forward, my hands shaking. "Donovan, why are you laughing? We are going to have a baby." He stopped laughing. His eyes turned flat and dead. He reached into his leather briefcase resting on the counter and pulled out a thick manila folder. He slammed it down onto the kitchen island right next to the velvet box. "You really think I am stupid, Stella?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "You think I am some naive fool you can manipulate with a fake pregnancy?" I recoiled as if he had struck me. "Fake. I took those tests today, Donovan. I am pregnant." "Whose is it?" he snapped, taking a step toward me. "Because it certainly is not mine." "What are you talking about? I have never been with anyone else since I met you." Donovan sneered, pointing at the folder. "Open the damn folder, Stella, and tell me how exactly you managed to get pregnant by a man who cannot have children." I flipped it open. Inside was a stack of medical records on the official letterhead of a high-end fertility clinic. I scanned the highlighted text. It was a surgical report dated 3 years ago. A full elective vasectomy. The post-operative analysis confirmed a 0% sperm count. "You had a vasectomy," I whispered, looking up at him in absolute horror. 3 years ago, long before we even met." "Why did you never tell me this? Why did you let me talk about having kids?" He leaned across the island, planting his hands on the cool stone. Because talking about it kept you compliant. It kept you hoping. But I made sure no woman could ever trap me with a child. So I will ask you one last time, Stella. Who have you been sleeping with? I backed away from the counter, my chest heaving as I struggled to breathe. Nobody, Donovan. I swear to you, I have never touched another man. These tests are positive. I am pregnant. Then you are a medical miracle, he mocked, his voice dripping with venom. Or you are a lying, cheating opportunist who got sloppy with her side piece and thought she could pin the bastard on a guy with a 7-figure bank account. You disgust me. The room spun. He lied for our entire relationship, knowing it was physically impossible. I tried to speak, but no words came out. The shock was absolute and paralyzing. Before I could process the massive lie he had just admitted to living for our entire marriage, the sound of a door opening echoed down the hallway. I tore my gaze away from Donovan and looked toward the guest bedroom. A young woman stepped out into the hallway light. She looked no older than 26, with blonde hair tied up in a messy bun. She was wearing one of Donovan's expensive cashmere sweaters, which barely stretched over her distinctly pregnant belly. My breath hitched in my throat. I looked from the woman to Donovan and back again, trying to make sense of the nightmare unfolding in my kitchen. "Donovan, who is that?" I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. The woman stepped further into the light, rubbing her belly protectively. She looked me up and down with pure boredom. "Donovan, is everything okay out here?" she asked, her voice nasal. "You promised you would get her out quickly." "Our house." I gripped the edge of the granite counter. I looked at Donovan, waiting for him to deny it. Instead, he walked around the island and wrapped his arm possessively around her shoulders. He kissed her head before turning his dead eyes back to me. "Stella, meet Courtney Donovan," said his tone casual. "She is 26, and she is carrying my child." "But you just said you had a vasectomy," I cried, pointing at the medical file. "You just showed me the paperwork. How can she be pregnant with your child if you are sterile, Donovan?" Donovan laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the kitchen. "Do you think a man in my position leaves anything to chance, Stella? I had the procedure done 3 years ago to protect myself from gold diggers like you. But before I did, I paid to have my samples frozen at a private facility. Courtney and I underwent an expensive clinical process to conceive this baby. I chose her. I planned this family, and I certainly did not plan it with a cheating liar who passes off another man's mistake as my own." "You are insane," I screamed. "You planned a family with another woman while sleeping in my bed, while letting me inject myself with hormones and track my cycles and cry every month when the test was negative. You watched me grieve over wanting a baby, and you paid another woman to carry your child." Courtney rolled her eyes. "Do not be so dramatic," she sighed. "Donovan realized months ago that you were never going to fit into the lifestyle he wanted. You are too independent, too focused on your data analysis career. He wanted a real mother for his child, someone who knows how to support a successful man. I had paid half the mortgage on this house for the past year. I had contributed my own 6-figure salary to our joint accounts to fund our lavish vacations and his networking dinners. I had been a devoted, faithful wife. "Pack your things," Stella Donovan commanded, moving toward me with a menacing stance. "I want you out of my house right now." "You cannot kick me out," I fired back. "This is my home too. I pay half the mortgage. I bought the furniture. You cannot just throw me out into the street." Donovan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and held it up for me to see. It was our joint banking app. I watched in horror as he transferred every penny from our joint savings and checking accounts into a private offshore account. With another few taps, he canceled the secondary credit cards attached to my name. "I absolutely can throw you out," he sneered, putting the phone away. "Read our prenuptial agreement, Stella. This house was purchased by me before we signed the marriage license. It is a prenuptial asset explicitly protected under state law. Your contributions were legally classified as shared marital expenses, not equity. You own nothing here. You emptied my savings." I gasped. seeing the zero balance notifications on my screen. That was my salary, Donovan. You have no right to touch my direct deposits. It was a joint account, which means I have legal authority to move those funds to protect my assets from a cheating spouse, Donovan said. I am filing for divorce tomorrow morning, and I am filing an at-fault divorce based on your blatant infidelity. That pregnancy test on the counter is all the proof I need to show the judge that you violated our marriage contract. You will get nothing. Now get out before I call the police. I am not leaving, I shouted. You cannot do this. Donovan did not argue. He turned around and marched up the stairs. A minute later, he reappeared carrying the large suitcase I kept in the closet. He dragged it down the stairs and began violently throwing my coat, shoes, and clothes into the bag. He zipped it up and dragged it toward the front door. He threw the door open. The Seattle storm was raging outside, the rain coming down in sheets. He hurled my suitcase out onto the wet driveway. The bag hit the concrete with a loud thud, splashing puddles of water over my clothes. "Get out!" Donovan roared, pointing into the storm. I looked at him and then at Courtney, who was watching with a satisfied smirk while eating an apple. The man I thought I loved had been systematically plotting my destruction. He had drained my money, replaced me with a younger woman, and set me up to take the fall for a divorce I never wanted. I grabbed my purse from the counter and walked toward the door. I did not look back. I stepped out into the freezing rain, and Donovan slammed the wooden door shut behind me. The lock clicked instantly. I stood there shivering in the dark driveway, staring at my ruined suitcase entirely alone. I dragged my wet suitcase across the concrete. The wheels jammed on the pavement, but I pulled with all my strength. The freezing Seattle rain plastered my hair to my face. I reached my car and shoved the ruined luggage into the back seat. I climbed into the driver's seat, shivering violently. My teeth chattered as I turned the key to blast the heater. I pulled out my phone, praying my personal credit card survived. Donovan's purge. I opened a booking app to reserve a cheap motel room. The screen loaded for 5 agonizing seconds before flashing an error message. Transaction declined. I tried my backup card. Declined again. Donovan had systematically frozen everything tied to my name, using his leverage as the primary account holder. He truly left me with zero funds. Panic constricted my throat. I had no cash and no access to my salary. I stared out at the dark, empty streets, realizing how incredibly vulnerable I was. I scrolled through my contacts. Most of my friends were wives of his colleagues, who would side with the money in a heartbeat. I isolated myself in my career and marriage, leaving me with only one option. I had to go to my mother. My mother. Sylvia lived in Bellevue, about a 30-minute drive away. She always favored my younger sister Madison, who possessed a very superficial charm and a knack for manipulating our mother's vanity. But surely a mother would not turn away her pregnant daughter in the middle of a storm. I put the car in drive and gripped the wheel, navigating the slick highways. I pulled into Sylvia's driveway. The lights inside were blazing. I ran up the front steps, leaving my suitcase in the car, and pounded on the oak door. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to retain body heat. The porch light flicked on. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. My mother stood there, wearing a silk robe. Her face was set in a furious mask. She did not open the screen door or reach out to hug me. She glared at me with cold disappointment. Behind her stood my sister, Madison, holding a glass of red wine and wearing designer loungewear. She looked me up and down with a mixture of disgust and triumph. "Mom, please let me in," I begged, my voice shaking from the bitter cold. Donovan kicked me out and locked my bank accounts. "I just need a place to sleep tonight." Sylvia crossed her arms over her chest. "Do not play the victim here. Stella Donovan called us 20 minutes ago. He told us exactly what you did. He was in tears. He said he found a positive pregnancy test and you confessed to sleeping with another man." I gasped, gripping the handle of the screen door. "He is lying. Mom? He set me up. He had a secret vasectomy 3 years ago and hid it from me. He has a mistress living in our house right now, and she is pregnant with his child. He locked my accounts so I cannot fight back." Madison rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, Stella. You always were a terrible liar. Donovan is a vice president at a hedge fund. Why would a man like that need to trap you? You got caught cheating, and now you are making up wild stories to cover your tracks. You ruined your marriage. I stared at my sister in disbelief. Madison, you know me. I work 60 hours a week. I make a six-figure salary as a director. When would I even have time to cheat? I am telling the truth. You must believe me. Sylvia uncrossed her arms and pointed a finger at me. I will not have a tramp standing on my porch, making up disgusting lies about a generous, loving man. Donovan has been nothing but supportive of this family. Do you have any idea what you jeopardized tonight? I frowned, the cold rain dripping from my eyelashes. Jeopardized? What are you talking about? Madison stepped forward, a smug grin spreading across her face. Donovan is an angel investor. My virtual fashion startup was struggling to secure funding. Yesterday, Donovan finalized a $500,000 investment into my company. He saved my business. He believes in my vision, and you tried to humiliate him with another man's baby. The puzzle pieces snapped into place. It was never about believing my story. It was about the money Donovan had strategically bought my family's loyalty. 24 hours before he threw me out. He knew my mother was vain and my sister was desperate for cash. He purchased their allegiance for $500,000, knowing they would throw me to the wolves to protect his investment. Mom, you are choosing his money over your own daughter, I asked, my voice cracking. I am pregnant. I am freezing. I have absolutely nothing. You brought this on yourself, Sylvia said. Donovan assured us the investment is safe, as long as we do not support your toxic behavior. He requested we respect his boundaries during this difficult divorce. I will not let your infidelity destroy Madison's future. Mom, please, I cried, pulling at the screen door. Just for one night, I will sleep on the floor. I will figure things out tomorrow. Do not do this. Sylvia took a step back and reached for the oak door. You are a disgrace to this family, Stella. You were too independent for your own good, and look where it got you. Do not come back here until you apologize to your husband and sign whatever divorce papers he gives you. The door slammed shut in my face. The deadbolt clicked, echoing in the suburban night. I stood alone on the porch, the rain washing over me. My mother and sister had sold me out for a startup. I walked back to my car. I sat staring through the windshield with nowhere to turn. The rain battered the glass, blurring the streetlights. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. A violent tremor wrecked my body. It was a combination of freezing wet clothes and the absolute shock of the betrayal. My own mother and sister sold me out for a $500,000 check. They traded my safety for a failing startup. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. The tears finally came, burning my cold cheeks. I sobbed, gasping for air in the confined space of my sedan. I was pregnant now. I was entirely broke now. My sociopath husband planned my destruction with a pregnant mistress living in my house. My family threw me away like trash. I felt a heavy, suffocating darkness pressing down on my chest. I reached out to turn the ignition key again, just to keep the heater running so I would not freeze to death. Suddenly, a sharp tap on my window made me jump. I gasped, scrambling backward against the console, my heart hammering. Through the rain-slicked glass, I saw a tall figure in the shadows. He raised a hand and wiped away the condensation. It was Jamal. He was my 34-year-old brother-in-law. Madison had married him 3 years ago. Jamal was an African-American chef owning a popular restaurant downtown. He was the only person in this family who actually worked for his success, instead of manipulating others. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the lock. I did not know if Sylvia had sent him out here to drive me away. But Jamal looked back toward the house with a tense, urgent expression. He tapped the glass again, pointing downward. I pressed the button, rolling the window down an inch. The freezing wind whipped inside. "Stella, open the door," he whispered, barely carrying over the storm. "I am not here to fight. Please, just let me help." I unlocked the door, Jamal pulled it open and leaned inside, shielding himself from the view of the house. His dark eyes were filled with profound sympathy. "I heard everything from the hallway," he said, shaking his head in disgust. "Madison and Sylvia are out of their minds. I do not believe a single word that guy Donovan said on the phone tonight. You are the hardest working woman I know, Stella. You do not cheat and you certainly do not lie." Fresh tears spilled over my eyelashes. "Thank you, Jamal," I whispered, my voice cracking. "You are the only one." He reached into the pocket of his heavy winter coat. He pulled out a thick wad of $20 bills and a brass key. He pressed both into my freezing palm, closing my fingers tightly. "Listen to me carefully," he urged, glancing over his shoulder. "I cannot let you sleep in a freezing car, especially not if you are pregnant. That key opens the back door to the studio apartment directly above my restaurant. I use it as an office sometimes when I work late, but it has a clean bed, a working heater, and a bathroom. You go there right now. Do not tell anyone where you are." I stared at the key and the cash. "Jamal, this is too much. What if Madison finds out? She will be furious with you." Jamal let out a harsh, bitter sigh. "Let my wife be furious. I am sick of watching them worship money over basic human decency. Donovan buying her loyalty with $500,000 makes my stomach turn. That investment money is dirty. I can feel it. I will deal with Madison later. Right now, you need to get warm and stay safe." He squeezed my hand one last time. "Drive safe, Stella. Lock the deadbolt when you get inside." He slammed the car door shut. I watched him jog back toward the house, disappearing into the shadows. I drove away from the neighborhood that had just rejected me. The drive to downtown Seattle felt like a blur. I navigated the slick streets, holding onto the brass key like a lifeline. I pulled into the alleyway behind Jamal Restaurant. The brick building looked solid and welcoming. I found the heavy steel door he mentioned and unlocked it. I climbed the narrow wooden staircase in the dark. I pushed open the door and flipped the light switch. It was a modest space. A twin bed sat next to a small desk covered in restaurant invoices. A radiator hummed quietly against the wall, pumping precious heat into the room. I locked the deadbolt behind me just as Jamal instructed. I peeled off my soaked clothes, leaving them in a pile. I stood under the hot shower, letting the scalding water wash away the freezing rain and the physical chill of Donovan cruelty. I wrapped myself in a clean towel and crawled into the twin bed. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Donovan smirking. I saw Courtney rubbing her belly. I saw my mother slamming the door. The emotional agony was excruciating. I placed a hand over my flat stomach, protecting the tiny life growing inside me. Sleep never came. Morning finally broke, gray and bleak. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the brick wall. I needed a lawyer, but how could I hire legal counsel when Donovan blocked my funds? Suddenly, a sharp knock startled me. I crept down the wooden staircase. I peered through the peephole. A man stood on the alley pavement, holding a manila envelope. "You have been served," he announced, shoving the envelope through the slot, turning and walking away. I picked up the envelope. It was the petition for dissolution of marriage. Donovan was demanding full ownership of the house and joint assets, citing adultery. I sat on the bottom step, clutching the papers, my heart pounding. The crisp white pages felt like a physical weight in my freezing hands. Donovan was not just filing for an at-fault divorce. He was requesting emergency spousal support, claiming my substantial six-figure income was necessary to maintain the lifestyle he had grown accustomed to. He had drained every cent of my liquid cash, locked me out of my own home, and now he wanted the court to force me to continue funding his lavish life with his pregnant mistress. I dropped the papers onto the wooden stair. The cold reality of my situation crushed the remaining breath from my lungs. I was 33 years old, pregnant with my first child, completely penniless, and facing a brutal legal battle against a wealthy hedge fund vice president who knew exactly how to manipulate the justice system. I had no lawyer. I had no access to my professional network. I was completely isolated. I slowly gathered the scattered documents and dragged myself back up the narrow staircase to the studio apartment. The small radiator hissed in the corner, fighting a losing battle against the damp Seattle chill seeping through the brick walls. I collapsed onto the edge of the twin bed. I looked at the small stack of $20 bills Jamal had pressed into my hand. It was barely enough to buy food for a week, let alone hire the kind of aggressive legal representation I desperately needed to fight Donovan. A profound wave of grief washed over me, entirely distinct from the anger. I thought of Harrison. My chest physically ached at the memory of my first husband. Harrison was a brilliant biotech founder, a man who built his company with integrity and treated everyone with boundless compassion. When a tragic highway pileup took his life in early 2024, it shattered my universe. He was my protector, my best friend, and the love of my life. Donovan had swooped in during my lowest point of mourning, playing the role of a supportive savior. I realize now that Donovan had merely studied my vulnerabilities, targeting my six-figure salary and my desperation for a family. Harrison would have never let anyone treat me this way. I pulled my knees to my chest, wrapping my arms around my legs. I closed my eyes and allowed myself a moment of pure, unadulterated despair. I had hit rock bottom. I had nothing left to lose. Suddenly, the sharp ring of my cell phone shattered the heavy silence in the room. I flinched, staring at the screen resting on the small wooden desk. The caller ID displayed an unknown number from a downtown Seattle exchange. My immediate instinct was to ignore it. I assumed it was Donovan calling from a burner phone to gloat, or perhaps his shark of a lawyer trying to intimidate me into a quick settlement. The phone continued to ring, vibrating against the wood. A strange, inexplicable urge compelled me to stand up. I walked over and swiped the green button, raising the device to my ear. "Hello," I answered, my voice hoarse and defensive. "Mrs. Stella, is that you?" a male voice inquired. The tone was deep, authoritative, and impeccably professional. "Yes, this is Stella," I replied, tightening my grip on the phone. "Who is calling?" "My name is Mitchell Adams," he stated clearly. "I am 45 years old, and I serve as a senior trust and estate attorney at Vanguard Legal Group. I represented your late husband, Harrison." I stood completely still. The mention of Harrison's name sent a sudden jolt of electricity down my spine. Harrison estate had been settled over a year ago. The company's shares were sold, the life insurance was paid out, and I had used those funds to try and rebuild my life before Donovan took over my finances. Why is a trust attorney calling me now? "Mr. Adams." "I am not sure I understand," I said cautiously. "Harrison affairs were finalized shortly after his accident in early 2024. There must be some kind of mistake." "There is no mistake," Stella Mitchell replied, his voice lowering to a serious, razor-sharp cadence. "I assure you, my records are flawless. I need to speak with you regarding a highly confidential matter concerning Harrison Biotech assets. It is imperative that we meet immediately." I looked down at my damp clothes and the divorce papers scattered across the bed. "Mr. Adams, I am currently dealing with an extreme personal emergency," I explained, my voice trembling slightly. "I have no access to my bank accounts. I do not have a vehicle right now. I cannot possibly travel to a downtown law firm today." Mitchell did not miss a beat. His response was immediate and commanding. "Do not worry about transportation, Stella. I understand your situation might be precarious, which is exactly why this meeting cannot wait. I am sending a private, secure black car to your current location. It will arrive in exactly 20 minutes. You need to be in it." I hesitated, my mind racing with suspicion and fear. Why the sudden urgency, I asked? What could possibly be so important after all this time? "What I have to share with you cannot be discussed over unsecured cellular networks," Mitchell said firmly. "I will only say this. Harrison left specific instructions regarding a heavily protected asset. The stipulations require me to contact you directly if certain life-altering conditions are met. I believe those conditions have just been triggered. Please, Stella, trust me. Harrison wanted you protected above all else. The line went dead. I stared at the blank screen, my heart racing. A private car was coming. Harrison had left something behind. I grabbed my purse and prepared to face the unknown. I took one last long look at the divorce papers on the bed. My past was reaching out to save me from my ruined present. Exactly 20 minutes later, a sleek black town car idled beneath Jamal Restaurant. I pulled my damp coat tightly around my shoulders, climbing into the warm leather interior. The driver navigated the rain-slicked streets of downtown Seattle, pulling up to a towering glass skyscraper. I rode the private elevator, stepping out into the immaculate reception area of Vanguard Legal Group. The walls were paneled in rich mahogany, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the stormy harbor. A receptionist escorted me to a massive corner office. Mitchell Adams stood waiting behind a polished walnut desk. He was a formidable presence. Dressed in a sharp-tailored suit with silver at his temples, he possessed the calculating gaze of a man who missed absolutely nothing. "Please sit down, Stella," Mitchell said, gesturing to a plush leather armchair. He poured me a glass of hot water from a silver carafe. "You look like you have had a harrowing night." "I appreciate the ride, Mr. Adams," I replied, my voice steadying as the warmth seeped into my bones. "But you need to tell me what this is about. You mentioned Harrison." Mitchell nodded and unlocked the top drawer of his desk. He withdrew a thick leather-bound portfolio. "Harrison was not just a brilliant biotech pioneer, Stella. He was also an astute judge of character. Shortly before his fatal accident in early 2024, Harrison came to me with specific concerns. He noticed Donovan hovering around your professional circles. Harrison recognized exactly what Donovan was: a predatory opportunist viewing people as financial stepping stones." I stared at Mitchell, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Harrison knew about Donovan," I whispered. "I did not even start dating him until months after the funeral." "Harrison saw the warning signs," Mitchell explained, leaning forward. "Donovan had previously attempted to aggressively acquire a subsidiary of Harrison biotech firm. During those negotiations, Harrison witnessed Donovan's ruthless lack of ethics firsthand. He told me Donovan was a gold digger wearing a hedge fund suit. Because Harrison loved you deeply, he took extreme legal measures ensuring you would never be left destitute if his worst fears came true." Mitchell opened the portfolio and turned the document toward me. He established a secondary, highly classified spendthrift trust, completely separate from the initial estate settlement you received last year. This trust contains a diversified portfolio of biotech patents and offshore index funds. Its current valuation is exactly $35 million. The number hit me with the force of a physical blow. $35 million. I gasped, gripping the armrests of my chair. How is that even possible? Why did you not tell me about this during the initial estate execution? "Because I was legally bound by the ironclad stipulations Harrison placed on the trust," Mitchell said, his dark eyes locking onto mine. "Harrison knew that if you inherited that wealth immediately, while in a state of profound grief, a predator like Donovan would manipulate you into marrying him without a prenuptial agreement. Donovan would have drained your accounts just as he did last night. Therefore, Harrison designed the trust to remain completely invisible and inaccessible until two specific biological and legal triggers were met." "What triggers?" I asked, my breath catching. Mitchell pointed to a specific paragraph on the heavy parchment paper. "First, the trust is only activated if you become pregnant with your first biological child. Harrison wanted to secure a lineage of care. He knew that motherhood would shift your priorities and demand absolute financial security. He wanted to guarantee that your child would never lack for anything." My hand instinctively flew to my flat stomach. "I am pregnant." I breathed, the reality of the morning positive tests rushing back. Donovan kicked me out precisely because of it. He had a secret vasectomy 3 years ago, and his mistress is pregnant. He accused me of cheating and threw me into the street. Mitchell simply nodded, his expression hardening with professional fury. "That brings us to the second and most crucial trigger," Mitchell continued. "The spendthrift clause. This legal mechanism is designed specifically to protect assets from creditors and manipulative spouses. Harrison mandated that you cannot access a single dime of this $35 million while legally bound to Donovan. To unlock the funds, you must be in active divorce proceedings or legally separated. The trust is constructed so flawlessly that Donovan cannot claim it as marital property. He cannot touch it. He cannot seize it. It is legally shielded from him in every conceivable jurisdiction. I sat frozen, absorbing the sheer magnitude of Harrison foresight. My late husband had essentially built a $35 million fortress around my future from beyond the grave. You are telling me, I asked, my voice gaining a newfound strength, that the very pregnancy Donovan used to throw me out is the exact key that unlocks $35 million. Yes, Mitchell replied, a fierce, predatory smile finally breaking across his stoic face. But we must be incredibly strategic, Stella. Donovan is a hedge fund shark who knows how to bleed people dry in civil court. We must keep the existence of the Spendthrift Trust a complete secret until the very last moment. You must play the role of the desperate broke wife he expects you to be. First, we secure your immediate living situation using a discreet line of credit from the firm. You will not have to return to that freezing studio apartment above the restaurant. Then we let Donovan file his aggressive fault-based divorce. He will demand spousal support and claim you owe him half your future earnings. We let him put all his lies on the public record. Every falsified document he submits will only multiply the severity of his eventual legal penalties. We let him dig his own grave. He is unaware that his arrogant cruelty has already sealed his destruction, and when the time is right, we spring the trap. I stared at Mitchell as the weight of his words settled over me. The reality of my situation was a double-edged sword. My unborn baby was the ultimate key to a $35 million empire, but I was still legally bound to a ruthless financial predator. Donovan had destroyed my life over a pregnancy he claimed was a product of my infidelity. If he discovered that this very child was the trigger to a massive fortune, his strategy would pivot instantly. He would not just want to ruin me emotionally and financially, he would try to claim custody. He would drag me through years of grueling litigation, claiming his marital rights entitled him to manage the assets. He would weaponize the justice system to bleed the trust dry. Mitchell leaned back in his leather chair, folding his hands on the polished walnut desk. Donovan operates like a parasite, Stella. He thrives on finding a host and draining it. Right now, he thinks you are an empty husk. We must keep him believing exactly that. If he catches even a faint scent of $35 million, he will withdraw his at-fault divorce petition today. He will file for reconciliation. He will manipulate the court into forcing a paternity test, and he will fight for joint control over your child, using his hedge fund resources to bury us in endless appeals. I placed my hands protectively over my stomach. I will not let him near my baby. I will never let him touch a single cent of what Harrison built. Then we build a fortress, Mitchell stated firmly. We construct an impenetrable wall around your medical and financial data starting right now. Mitchell stood up and walked over to a heavy steel safe hidden behind a mahogany bookshelf. He opened it and withdrew a sleek new smartphone and a solid black credit card. He placed them on the desk in front of me. This phone is encrypted on a secure private network. You will use this for all communications with me and with your medical providers. The credit card is tied to a discreet corporate account managed exclusively by my firm. It is a loan drawn against your future assets. You will use it to secure a safe, comfortable apartment under a shell corporation. Donovan will never be able to trace your living expenses. To him, you will simply be a destitute woman surviving on the charity of friends or living in squalor. I picked up the black card, feeling a surge of profound gratitude. Harrison had truly thought of everything. But what about my medical records? I asked, my brow furrowing with concern. Donovan knows I took those pregnancy tests. He saw them on the kitchen island. He might try to subpoena my medical files to prove infidelity during the divorce proceedings. Mitchell nodded, his expression turning razor sharp. We anticipate his every move. I am filing a protective order sealing your medical records under strict federal privacy laws. We will argue that since Donovan has publicly declared the child is not his and has initiated an at-fault divorce, based entirely on that assertion, he has forfeited any immediate right to your prenatal medical information. We will force his lawyer to fight through miles of red tape just to verify the pregnancy timeline. By the time they get anywhere near your files, we will have the trap fully set. I took a deep breath, letting the strategies sink into my mind. It was a terrifying game of chess. I had to play the victim while holding the ultimate winning hand. I had to let Donovan believe he was completely destroying me. You must be entirely convincing, Mitchell warned, his dark eyes locking onto mine. Donovan's ego is his absolute greatest weakness. He needs to feel powerful. He needs to see you broken and begging. When you communicate with his legal team, you must sound panicked. When you respond to his ridiculous demands, you must act desperate. Let him demand absurd alimony. Let him claim your remaining professional assets. Sign absolutely nothing, but let him draft the most aggressive predatory divorce settlement his lawyers can possibly imagine. I nodded slowly, a cold determination replacing my previous fear. I want him to put everything on the public record, I said, my voice steadying. I want him to submit his fake vasectomy paperwork to the court. I want him to document every single lie under oath. Exactly. Mitchell smiled a fierce, predatory grin. Perjury is a felony, Stella. Family court judges absolutely despise being manipulated by fraudulent medical documents. When Donovan submits that fake vasectomy clinic report to a federal judge, he will commit a serious crime. We will let him dig his grave so deep that he will never see daylight again. The plan was brilliant. Harrison had given me an unbreakable shield, and Mitchell was forging a lethal sword. I spent the next 2 hours in that corner office meticulously reviewing the divorce petition Donovan had sent to the studio apartment. Donovan was demanding the house, all our joint investments, and a permanent alimony order based on my 6-figure data analyst salary. He claimed my alleged infidelity caused him severe emotional distress. Reading his arrogant demands filled me with a quiet, burning fury. As our meeting finally concluded, Mitchell handed me a set of brass keys. These belong to a secure, high-rise apartment in downtown Seattle. The building has 24-hour security and private elevator access. Go there. Rest. Eat something nutritious for the baby. Starting tomorrow, we go on the offensive by playing defense. I stood up, clutching the encrypted phone and the black credit card. Thank you, Mr. Adams. For everything. For honoring Harrison's wishes and protecting my child. Harrison was a truly good man, Mitchell replied softly, walking me to the heavy office door. He wanted you to be completely free, Stella. We will ensure that you get that exact freedom. While I rested in the sanctuary of my new apartment, I would later learn a very different scene unfolded across the city inside the glass-walled conference room of an elite hedge fund. Donovan sat at a massive mahogany table sipping expensive scotch. He felt completely invincible. He had successfully drained my financial resources, locked me out in the freezing rain, and secured his future with Courtney. The heavy glass doors swung open and Victor Thorne strode in. He was Donovan's aggressive, high-priced divorce attorney. He was a legal shark known for destroying spouses with surgical precision. Victor did not look triumphant today. Instead, he carried a thick manila folder wearing an expression of intense, concentrated urgency. We have a major complication, Victor announced, dropping the folder onto the polished wood. I ran routine background checks on Stella to guarantee she had no hidden accounts. We needed to be certain she could not afford a competent lawyer to fight your spousal support demands. Donovan scoffed, taking another sip of scotch. She has nothing, Victor. I personally transferred her entire 6-figure salary into my offshore accounts. I canceled her credit cards. She is completely destitute. She probably slept in her sedan. Victor shook his head, his eyes narrowing behind wire-rimmed glasses. You are wrong, Donovan. She is not destitute. She is sitting on a financial nuclear bomb, and you threw her out of the blast radius. Donovan lowered his glass, his smug smile faltering. What are you talking about? I found a severe anomaly in the financial surveillance, Victor explained, pulling a sheet of paper from the folder. A high-level security ping originated from Vanguard Legal Group. They flagged her social security number. They are the apex predators of trust and estate law. I pulled some strings and utilized confidential contacts to dig deeper into why a firm of that magnitude would actively monitor your supposedly broke wife. Donovan leaned forward, his heart beating faster. Why? Victor pointed to the paper. Because her late husband Harrison did not just leave her a life insurance payout, he established a secondary, heavily classified spendthrift trust. It is a diversified portfolio packed with appreciating biotech patents and offshore index funds. Donovan frowned. He left her a secret trust. So what? I will claim it as marital property and add it to the divorce petition. I want half of whatever that dead man left her. You cannot touch it under current conditions, Victor stated flatly. The trust is valued at exactly $35 million. The number echoed in the vast conference room. $35 million. Donovan felt the air rush out of his lungs. He stared at his lawyer, struggling to process the sheer magnitude of that figure. 35 million. That was more than his entire net worth or what his executive board made in a decade. Victor leaned over the table, placing his hands flat against the mahogany. But there is a massive catch, Donovan. Harrison was brilliant. He locked the funds behind two ironclad legal triggers. First, Stella must be legally separated or divorcing her current husband, so he cannot access the funds. Second, and most importantly, the trust only activates if Stella conceives her first biological child. Donovan froze. The blood drained from his face as the realization hit him like a freight train. The pregnancy tests on the kitchen island. The plastic sticks he had laughed at before throwing me into the street. He had assumed I cheated because of his fake vasectomy. But what if I had not? What if those tests were real? If she is pregnant, Victor continued, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, and gives birth while you are divorcing her, she walks away with $35 million. Because of the spendthrift clause, you get absolutely nothing. You filed an at-fault divorce claiming infidelity. You publicly rejected the child. You essentially handed her the keys to the vault and walked away. Donovan stood up, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. He paced the conference room, his mind racing at a frantic speed. His arrogant dismissal of me vanished, entirely evaporating under the blinding heat of unimaginable greed. He did not see a cheating wife anymore. He saw a $35 million lottery ticket that he had just tossed into a dumpster. If that baby is mine, Donovan muttered, his eyes wide with manic calculation. If that baby is mine, I have paternal rights. I have a legal claim to child support and joint custody. I could leverage my parental rights to demand joint management of the child financial assets. I could control the trust. Exactly. Victor smiled a cold, predatory smile. But you cannot do that if you are actively accusing her of infidelity and demanding an at-fault divorce. If you push her away, she takes the money and vanishes. You need to pull her back in. You need to claim that child. Donovan stopped pacing. The psychological shift within him was instantaneous and absolute. His previous cruelty was instantly replaced by a desperate, ravenous hunger for Harrison wealth. He thought about Courtney sitting in his house pregnant with his arranged child. Courtney was suddenly a massive liability. I was the actual prize. Shred the divorce papers! Donovan commanded, his voice trembling with newfound greed. Withdraw the at-fault petition immediately. Do whatever it takes to pull it from the court records before she can officially respond. And then what Victor asked, packing the documents back into his folder. Then I become the perfect husband, Donovan said, a sinister smile twisting his features. I will tell her I made a terrible mistake. I will blame the stress of my job. I will tell her I want my family back. We pivot the entire strategy, Victor. We play the loving, reconciled couple until that baby is born and the trust is activated. I am not letting $35 million slip through my fingers. The very next morning, the aggressive legal machinery that Donovan had mobilized to crush me was abruptly thrown into reverse. Victor Thorne filed an emergency withdrawal of the at-fault divorce petition before the ink was even dry on the court docket. In its place, he submitted a motion for marital reconciliation and a formal request to establish paternity rights. Donovan did not waste a single second executing his sickening pivot. He knew he had to completely erase the image of the cruel, discarding husband and replace it with the facade of a panicked, grieving man who had simply made a terrible stress-induced mistake. He moved Courtney out of the master bedroom and into a discreet corporate rental, forbidding her from contacting him while he worked to secure my massive inheritance. I was sitting on the plush velvet sofa in my secure downtown apartment drinking a cup of herbal tea when my encrypted phone illuminated. Mitchell had set up a secure relay that forwarded messages from my old device. The screen lit up with a barrage of texts from Donovan. They arrived in rapid succession, meticulously crafted to sound desperate and heartbroken. Stella, please answer me. I made a horrific mistake. I am so deeply sorry. I stared at the screen, my stomach churning with disgust. Another text pinged immediately. I was out of my mind with stress from the hedge fund. When I saw the positive tests, I completely panicked. My urologist called me this morning, Stella. He confirmed that the vasectomy I had 3 years ago failed. It is rare, but it happens. Spontaneous recanalization. The clinic sent me the medical proof. The baby is mine. Our baby. Please let me come see you. Let me bring you home. A cold laugh escaped my lips. The sheer audacity of his lies was breathtaking. Spontaneous recanalization. He was actually trying to convince me that his reproductive system had miraculously repaired itself just in time to validate my pregnancy. He conveniently omitted any mention of Courtney or the brutal way he had hurled my belongings into the freezing storm. He painted himself as a confused, terrified victim of a medical anomaly who had lashed out in a moment of temporary insanity. My phone buzzed again, displaying a long voice message. I tapped the screen and put it on speaker, allowing his recorded voice to fill the quiet apartment. Stella, I am begging you. His voice cracked, perfectly modulated to convey deep emotional agony. I canceled the divorce filings. I fired my initial lawyer for giving me terrible, aggressive advice. I want my family back. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I love you and I love our unborn child. Please just tell me where you are so I can bring you back to our house. I immediately dialed Mitchell. He answered on the first ring. I read the messages to him, my voice steady and devoid of any residual affection. The trap had worked flawlessly. Mitchell chuckled, a dark, satisfied sound over the encrypted line. He took the bait, Stella. Victor Thorne just filed the reconciliation papers an hour ago. They are officially claiming the vasectomy failed and demanding full paternity establishment. Donovan is utterly blinded by his own greed. He thinks he is playing a masterful game of emotional chess, but he just handed us the exact weapon we need to destroy him. He wants me to come back to the house, I told Mitchell, gazing out at the Seattle skyline. He is playing the remorseful husband so perfectly it makes me physically ill. He assumes I am sitting somewhere freezing and desperate, waiting for him to graciously rescue me from the streets. You must maintain the illusion, Mitchell instructed, his tone turning strictly professional. You cannot return to that house. If you go back, he will try to establish a narrative of a stable, loving environment to secure joint custody of the assets once the trust activates. You must respond to him but keep your distance. Play the traumatized wife who is willing to talk but too scared to return. Make him work for it. Let him build a massive paper trail of his desperate attempts to claim this child. Every single text message claiming he wants to be a father is another nail in his coffin when we reveal the forensic accounting and the forgery. I drafted my response carefully, weighing every single word. I needed to sound hesitant, vulnerable, and deeply hurt. Donovan, you locked me out in the rain. You canceled my bank accounts. I am staying on a friend couch and I am terrified. I cannot just come home after what you did and after the things you said to me. I need time. His reply arrived less than 10 seconds later. He was practically vibrating with anticipation on the other end of the line. I know I was a monster, Stella. I was terrified of losing everything, and I projected my fear onto you. I will do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I am depositing $10,000 into a new account for you right now, so you can buy whatever you need for the baby. Just please do not shut me out completely. We can take it slowly. I stared at the screen as the deposit notification popped up. $10,000 of stolen embezzled money offered as a pathetic peace offering to secure a $35 million payday. The manipulation was absolute. Donovan believed he was reeling me back into his grasp. He thought his quick maneuvering and financial bait would erase the memory of his pregnant mistress and his cruel eviction. He had no idea that I was safely sitting in a luxury high-rise, actively orchestrating his total annihilation alongside the most ruthless trust attorney in the city. The shark had smelled the blood in the water, but he was entirely oblivious to the steel cage slowly closing around him completely. The following afternoon, I descended the wooden staircase into the alley behind Jamal Restaurant. Mitchell advised me to make a brief appearance there to maintain the carefully constructed illusion that I remained in that freezing studio apartment. I wore an oversized wool coat, keeping my hair unstyled. I rubbed my eyes until they were red. I needed to look the part of a broken, defeated woman clinging to survival. Pushing open the heavy steel door to enter the bustling kitchen, Jamal looked up from his prep station. His dark eyes widened in sudden warning, just a fraction of a second, before a shrill, familiar voice cut through the clatter of pots and pans. "Stella, oh my sweet, beautiful girl." I turned and froze. My mother Sylvia was rushing across the grease-stained tile floor, her arms outstretched. Right behind her trotted my sister Madison, wiping away invisible tears with a designer tissue. Less than 48 hours ago, these two women slammed a heavy oak door in my face, leaving their pregnant relative to freeze in a torrential Seattle storm. Now they were charging at me like I was a beloved war hero returning from battle. Sylvia threw her arms around me, crushing me against her expensive perfume. I kept my arms stiff at my sides, feeling my stomach churn with pure physical revulsion. Madison joined the embrace, resting her head on my shoulder and letting out a dramatic sob that belonged in a cheap soap opera. "We were so worried about you," Sylvia gasped, pulling back to examine my face. "When you ran off into the storm, we did not know what to do. We tried following your car, but you were too fast. I have not slept a single wink." I stared at her, keeping my expression perfectly blank. "You locked the deadbolt, Mom. You told me never to come back until I signed divorce papers." Sylvia waved her hand dismissively, as if I merely mentioned a slight change in the weather. Emotions were running incredibly high, sweetheart. We were all completely shocked by Donovan's phone call. You know how protective I am of this family. I panicked. But Donovan called us again this morning, and he explained everything. "He is an absolute wreck," Madison chimed in, grabbing my hand and squeezing it. "He drove over to our house at dawn. He was literally sobbing on our couch. He told us about the medical anomaly with his vasectomy. He explained how the stress of his hedge fund made him snap. He is begging for a second chance." I looked past my sister and caught Jamal staring from the kitchen line. He slowly shook his head, his jaw clenched in silent disgust. Jamal knew exactly what these two vultures were doing. He knew their sudden influx of maternal and sisterly affection was entirely transactional. I pulled my hand away from Madison, stepping back against a stainless steel prep table. "Why are you really here?" I asked, letting a tremor of fake vulnerability enter my voice. Sylvia exchanged a rapid, loaded glance with Madison. It was the exact look predators give each other when they corner a wounded animal. "Donovan told us about the call you received," Sylvia said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He told us about Harrison and the incredible financial blessing your late husband left behind. Stella, $35 million. That changes everything for our family." My blood ran ice cold, though I kept my face arranged in a mask of trembling confusion. Donovan had not just discovered the Spendthrift Trust. He had weaponized that information instantly. He used the promise of $35 million to reacquire my greedy mother and sister, ensuring they would act as his flying monkeys to drag me back into his trap. Madison stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with a frantic, greedy light. "My virtual fashion startup is expanding so fast, Stella. Donovan $500,000 investment was a great seed round, but we are burning through cash trying to scale the servers. If our family is sitting on $35 million, we can build an absolute empire. We do not have to rely on outside investors anymore. You can be my primary partner. The sheer audacity of her pitch made me want to laugh until I screamed. Madison did not care that my husband had a pregnant mistress living in my house. She did not care that I had spent a night shivering in a damp room above a kitchen. She only cared that my womb was a walking ATM that could fund her ridiculous lifestyle. "Stella, you must forgive him," Sylvia urged, stepping closer and gripping my shoulders tightly. "Donovan made a terrible mistake, but he is a powerful, wealthy man who can protect that inheritance. A woman cannot manage $35 million by herself. You need a husband who understands high finance. You need Donovan to help you navigate the taxes and the legalities. Think about your baby. Think about the legacy you can build for all of us." I looked down at the floor, forcing my shoulders to slump in defeat. I channeled every ounce of exhaustion I felt, playing the role of the overwhelmed, isolated daughter who desperately needed her family approval. I let a single tear slide down my cheek. "I am just so confused," I whispered, letting my voice break perfectly. "He hurt me so badly, Mom. He threw my clothes into the rain." "I know, baby, I know," Sylvia cooed, wrapping her arms around me again. "But marriage is about forgiveness. Men face terrible pressures in the corporate world. Donovan is a good provider. He wants to bring you home today. He wants to go to couples counseling. Do not throw away your family over one bad night." I rested my forehead against my mother's shoulder, breathing in the scent of her hypocrisy. I needed them to report back to Donovan that his manipulation was working. I needed the shark to believe the bait was firmly hooked in my mouth. "I cannot go back to the house today," I murmured, keeping my voice fragile and meek. "I am too overwhelmed. I need a few days to process the medical news about the vasectomy. Tell Donovan I am thinking about it. Tell him I am willing to read his text messages, but I need him to give me just a little bit of space." Madison patted my back enthusiastically. "That is perfectly reasonable, Stella. We will tell him to be patient. He will do whatever you ask. Just promise us you will not do anything rash like calling a divorce lawyer. We need to keep this wealth inside the family." "I promise," I whispered, lifting my head and wiping my eyes. "I will not call a divorce lawyer." I did not need a divorce lawyer. I had a ruthless trust attorney who was already orchestrating their total destruction. Sylvia and Madison kissed my cheeks, beaming with triumphant greed, before practically skipping out the back door of the restaurant. They were eager to report their success to Donovan. As the heavy steel door clicked shut, Jamal walked over holding a clean kitchen towel. He handed it to me, his dark eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and fierce respect. "You are a much better actress than they are, Stella," he said quietly. I wiped the fake tears from my face, my posture instantly straightening into cold, unyielding steel. "They have absolutely no idea what is coming, Jamal," I replied. "I am going to burn their entire world to the ground." The days following that confrontation moved slowly. I remained isolated inside the apartment Mitchell provided. I ignored the apologies flooding my phone from my mother and sister. Donovan sent flowers to Jamal's restaurant assuming I lived upstairs. His fragile patience shattered. The remorseful husband act evaporated. The shark returned with a vengeance. 4 days later, Mitchell summoned me to his office. When I stepped out of the elevator, I found him holding a thick stack of legal documents. He looked profoundly entertained. "Donovan has officially escalated," Mitchell announced, tossing the papers onto his desk. "He realized you will not simply walk back into his house. He decided to drag you into family court to force your hand. He wants to legally paralyze you until you submit to his control." I walked over and stared at the daunting pile of legal filings. What exactly is he demanding? Mitchell gestured to the first document. He filed an emergency petition for a mandatory court-ordered DNA test. He is demanding the test be conducted immediately. He wants absolute confirmation that he is the biological father. He is pairing this with a preemptive filing for full joint custody. He is establishing parental rights. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I placed a hand over my waist. He does not want this baby, Mitchell. He called it a mistake. He kicked me out because of it. He only wants custody rights so he can use the child as a hostage. Exactly. Mitchell agreed, his eyes turning icy. He knows that if he controls 50% of the child, he essentially controls the primary beneficiary of the spendthrift trust. Look at the injunction. I picked up the second packet of legal jargon. My eyes scanned the aggressive demands drafted by Victor Thorne. My heart skipped a beat as I read the printed header. It was an emergency financial injunction. Donovan was petitioning a federal judge to freeze the trust Harrison left behind. He is trying to freeze the trust, I asked, my voice trembling with genuine fear. How can he even attempt that? You said the spendthrift clause was an absolute fortress completely shielded from him. It is heavily shielded, Mitchell replied. But Victor Thorne is an expensive creative predator. He found a tiny loophole, and he is trying to exploit it to pry the vault open. Turn to page 14. I flipped through the documents until I found the highlighted section. According to the filing, Donovan claimed the trust was no longer entirely separate property. His argument hinged on a single minor transaction from early 2024. I do not understand, I said, shaking my head. He is talking about a $500 charge. Mitchell leaned against his desk. Shortly after Harrison passed away, you paid an administrative retainer fee to Vanguard Legal Group to process estate paperwork. You paid that $500 invoice using the joint checking account shared with Donovan. Victor Thorne is arguing that by using shared marital funds to maintain the legal entity that houses the trust, you commingled the assets. He claims that $500 joint payment transforms the entire portfolio into shared marital property. I stared at Mitchell in sheer disbelief. That is completely insane. It was a $500 clerical fee. He is trying to claim $35 million over a $500 transaction. In high-stakes family law, sanity is entirely irrelevant, Mitchell said smoothly. Victor Thorne does not believe this argument will hold up during a final trial. It is a tactical strike. He is throwing legal spaghetti at the wall to secure an emergency freeze. He wants to lock up the money so you cannot fight back. He wants to starve you out. He assumes you are broke, terrified, and living in a damp room. He thinks this injunction will force you to crawl back, begging for a settlement to survive. I felt a surge of rage burning through my veins. Donovan was trying to suffocate me using the very legal system that was supposed to protect people. He was weaponizing his wealth to steal my future and control my child. Can the judge actually freeze the funds? I asked, my grip tightening on the papers. A cautious judge might grant a temporary freeze pending a full investigation, Mitchell admitted. But remember, Stella, we are not trying to access those funds right now anyway. You have the secure credit line I provided. Donovan can file all the injunctions he wants. It will not change the fact he is walking blindly into a trap. Mitchell walked around the desk and stood beside me. This aggressive move is exactly what we wanted, Stella. Donovan is formally demanding a DNA test. He is submitting official court documents swearing he wants to be a father. He is aggressively pursuing the trust. He is putting his greed and lies onto the permanent public record. I looked down at the court summons. The hearing was scheduled for next week. Donovan expected me to show up in a cheap suit, trembling and unprepared. He expected to steamroll me with his high-priced legal team. Let him have his mandatory DNA test, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Let him file his injunctions and demand his 50% custody. I want him to feel like he is winning every single battle. I want him to believe he has me completely cornered. Mitchell smiled, a dark, triumphant expression. We will go to family court. We will let Victor Thorne present his commingling argument. We will agree to the paternity test. We will give them exactly enough rope to hang themselves completely. I placed the documents back onto the polished walnut desk. Donovan thought his aggression would break my spirit. He had no idea his legal maneuvers were simply accelerating his own absolute destruction. I was ready to face him in family court. I was ready to watch the shark drown in his own blood. Next morning, we launched our counterstrike. I returned to Mitchell's office, but this time the massive mahogany table was covered not in family court petitions but in dense financial ledgers and medical directories. Sitting across from Mitchell was a striking woman with sharp features and a piercing gaze. She wore a tailored gray suit and had an open laptop surrounded by stacks of banking profiles. Stella Mitchell said, gesturing to the woman. Meet Carmen. She is a forensic accountant who specializes in dismantling high-net-worth individuals who attempt to hide assets during hostile divorces. She used to work for the federal government hunting down shell corporations. Now she works for us. I sat across from Carmen feeling a surge of adrenaline. We are not just defending against his injunction, Carmen stated, her voice crisp and analytical. We are going to vivisect his entire financial ecosystem. Men like Donovan always leave a paper trail. They are arrogant. They believe they are smarter than the banking regulations. He authorized a $500,000 transfer to your sister's startup, and he is currently funding a high-end corporate rental for his pregnant mistress. We need to know exactly which accounts those funds originated from. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the cool wood of the table. He claims he used his personal executive bonuses. Carmen smiled a cold, calculating smile. Hedge fund vice presidents do not simply liquidate $500,000 in personal cash without triggering massive tax events. If he moved that money quickly, he cut corners. He circumvented the compliance department at his firm. I will trace every single wire transfer routing number and offshore shell account tied to his name. I will follow the money until I find the exact artery he bled to fund his lifestyle. I suspect he commingled client funds to cover his personal tracks. If I can prove he touched unauthorized capital, his career is completely over. While Carmen guts his finances, we handle the family court maneuvering, Mitchell interjected, pulling a fresh legal document from his folder. I have drafted our official response to Donovan emergency petition. We are going to give him exactly what he asked for. We are consenting to the mandatory DNA test. I looked at the document, feeling a brief flicker of apprehension. You are sure this is the right move? If we agree, he gets his paternity confirmation. That is exactly the point, Mitchell said, his eyes flashing with strategic brilliance. We want him officially named as the father on a federally recognized medical document. But we are setting strict parameters. We are filing a motion to ensure the test is conducted at a highly secure court-appointed facility. Donovan will not be allowed to use a private laboratory where he could potentially bribe a technician. A court-appointed clinic guarantees a legally indisputable chain of custody. When the results confirm he is the father, he will think he has secured his legal right to your child and the trust. He will celebrate his perceived victory. I nodded, signing my name on the consent form. Let him celebrate, I said, my voice hardening into steel. The higher he climbs, the harder he will crash. Once the DNA test is locked in, we spring the shadow trap. Mitchell continued pulling a secondary, much thicker file from his desk. He opened it to reveal the medical records Donovan had slammed onto the kitchen island during the eviction, the vasectomy paperwork. I stared at the logo of the high-end fertility clinic printed at the top of the page. He claims his urologist confirmed a spontaneous recanalization, I said, repeating the absurd medical excuse Donovan had texted me. He expects the court to believe his reproductive system magically repaired itself just in time to invalidate my alleged infidelity. Mitchell tapped a heavy pen against the document. Family court judges despise being lied to, Stella. Submitting falsified medical records to influence a divorce proceeding and secure custody is a severe federal offense. It is felony perjury. And I doubt this clinic is entirely legitimate. I have been analyzing their corporate registration. Why, what did you find? I asked, my pulse quickening. Mitchell leaned back, crossing his arms. The clinic listed on this letterhead was quietly dissolved and restructured under a different holding company 2 years ago. The presiding surgeon, whose signature is at the bottom of this page, lost his medical license in a neighboring state due to malpractice and unethical billing. Donovan did not go to a reputable doctor. He paid a black market physician to fabricate a bulletproof medical excuse so he could live a double life without consequences. Mitchell handed me a sealed envelope. I am filing a covert subpoena this afternoon, he announced. We are bypassing Donovan entirely and going straight to the source. We are legally compelling the holding company to surrender their patient intake forms, billing statements, and surgical logs for the exact month Donovan claims he had the procedure. We are going to audit the doctor who signed this paper. If the clinic cannot produce the corresponding surgical billing records, Donovan fabricated the entire document from thin air. He manufactured a lie to manipulate the court, and we are going to prove it. I held the sealed envelope, feeling the profound weight of the legal weapon inside it. Donovan had built his entire strategy on a foundation of absolute lies. He thought his wealth and aggressive legal posturing would intimidate me into submission. He thought he could buy my family, freeze my assets, and claim my child without facing any resistance. He was completely unaware that a forensic accountant was currently hacking into his financial nervous system, tracing his illicit transactions. He did not know that a ruthless trust attorney was legally cornering him into a perjury trap that carried a federal prison sentence. I looked from Carmen back to Mitchell. The sheer scale of our counterstrike was exhilarating. I am ready, I said, handing the envelope back to Mitchell. File the subpoena, trace the dirty money, schedule the DNA test. I want Donovan to walk into that mediation room believing he is a god. I want him completely blinded by his own arrogant delusions, so he never sees the legal executioner coming today. The next 48 hours transformed Mitchell Corner office into a high-stakes war room. I sat on the leather sofa drinking black tea while Carmen commanded the primary desk. Her fingers flew across her laptop keyboard, navigating encrypted financial databases and offshore banking registries. She was a silent, relentless hunter tracking Donovan digital footprints across international borders. I watched her screen flash with complex routing algorithms. Stella, come look at this, Carmen said, her voice dropping to a low, professional hum. She pointed at a highlighted row of transactions. I walked over and leaned in. Donovan is incredibly sloppy, she explained, tracing the screen. He routed the $500,000 investment for Madison through a Delaware shell corporation named Apex Ventures. But Apex Ventures has zero actual revenue. It is an empty holding tank. So where did the money actually originate? I asked, scanning the endless columns of numbers. Carmen smiled, her gaze fixed on the data. It originated from his hedge fund liquidity pool. It came from a client retirement portfolio Donovan personally manages. He authorized a margin call, manipulated the loss report, and skimmed the $500,000 directly off the top before compliance could audit the returns. He did not invest his own money into Madison's startup. He stole the life savings of his clients to buy your family loyalty. I felt a cold shiver trace its way down my spine. Embezzling client funds from a federally regulated hedge fund was not just a fireable offense. It was a massive financial crime that carried severe mandatory prison sentences. He stole their retirement money to bribe my mother and sister, I whispered, gripping the edge of the desk. It gets substantially worse. Carmen continued typing a new sequence into her terminal. I flagged another massive outgoing wire transfer from that exact same manipulated client portfolio. 2 weeks ago, Donovan authorized a wire for $200,000. He routed it through a different shell company and sent it directly to a luxury real estate escrow account. I pulled the property deed. Carmen tapped the enter key, and a digital copy of a real estate contract materialized on the screen. The property was a high-end luxury townhouse located in a very exclusive gated community just outside the city limits. The primary resident listed on the deed was Courtney. Donovan had literally stolen $200,000 from his hedge fund clients to secure a lavish secret home for his pregnant mistress. He is financing his entire double life with stolen capital, Carmen stated, leaning back in her chair and crossing her arms. He is bleeding his clients dry to cover his tracks. The moment I submit this forensic audit to the Securities and Exchange Commission, his career is instantaneously obliterated. The federal agents will raid his office, seize his personal assets, and march him out of the building in handcuffs. While Carmen systematically dismantled Donovan's financial empire, Mitchell was actively working his own angle. He had spent the morning aggressively battling the holding company that previously owned the defunct fertility clinic. By noon, a courier arrived with a heavily sealed box of subpoenaed medical records. Mitchell carried the box into the office and locked the heavy mahogany door behind him. Let us see exactly how far Donovan went to construct his medical lie, Mitchell announced, pulling a sleek silver letter opener from his pocket and slicing through the thick security tape. He spread the documents across the remaining empty space on the desk. They were the raw, unedited intake logs, surgical schedules, and billing reports from the exact month Donovan claimed he received his vasectomy. Mitchell scanned the pages, his eyes darting back and forth across the fine print. As expected, the clinic was an absolute sham, Mitchell declared, holding up a surgical ledger. The facility operated as a front for a disgraced physician who specialized in providing wealthy clients with fabricated medical alibis. Look at the surgical schedule for that specific week. I leaned over the desk, examining the yellowed paper. There were several names listed, but Donovan was entirely absent from the registry. There was no intake form. There was no pre-operative blood work. There was absolutely no record of him ever stepping foot inside the operating room. If he was never a patient, how did he get the official paperwork, I asked, pointing to the fake document Donovan had thrown at me during the eviction. Mitchell pulled a secondary file from the box. He paid for a blank template. I found the corresponding financial transaction hidden in the clinic accounting ledger. Donovan wired $10,000 to the physician private account coded as a premium consultation fee. In exchange, the disgraced doctor provided him with a forged post-operative report, complete with a fraudulent signature and a falsified 0% sperm count analysis. Mitchell tossed the fake document onto the pile. Submitting this fabricated paper to a federal judge during an active divorce proceeding elevates his deception from a simple lie to felony perjury. He willfully manufactured evidence to manipulate the court system and coerce a favorable custody and financial ruling. When we present these subpoenaed logs to the judge, Donovan will be facing direct criminal prosecution before he even steps out of the mediation room. I stood back, looking at the overwhelming mountain of evidence spread across the room. On one side of the desk, Carmen had successfully mapped out a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme that would trigger an immediate federal raid. On the other side, Mitchell had acquired undeniable proof of felony perjury and medical fraud. Donovan believed he was the apex predator circling a helpless victim. He thought his aggressive legal filings and stolen money made him an untouchable god. He had no idea that we had just transformed his entire life into a crime scene. "We have everything we need," Mitchell said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. "The forensic accounting is ironclad. The medical fraud is documented and verified. We have successfully secured the weapons required to execute his total annihilation." Carmen closed her laptop with a sharp, definitive click. "The financial dossier is completely finalized and ready for submission." I looked at the two brilliant, ruthless professionals who had helped me construct this lethal counterstrike. My fear had completely evaporated, replaced by a cold, unyielding anticipation. Donovan wanted to drag me into a high-stakes mediation room to force my surrender. He wanted to use my unborn child as leverage to claim the $35 million trust Harrison left behind. I was more than ready to grant him that meeting. I wanted to look him directly in the eyes when the trap finally snapped shut. "Schedule the mediation," I commanded, my voice echoing with pure icy resolve. "Let us go destroy him completely right now." The mediation room at the federal courthouse was suffocatingly sterile. The walls were paneled in synthetic wood, and the massive conference table dominated the center of the room. It was the arena Donovan had chosen for my execution. I walked in alongside Mitchell, feeling the cold weight of the encrypted phone and the thick legal folders we had prepared. We were the first to arrive. I took my seat facing the door, my posture perfectly straight. Mitchell sat beside me, projecting an aura of absolute undisturbed calm. 10 minutes later, the heavy double doors swung open. Donovan strolled into the room looking like he had already won the lottery. He wore a custom-tailored navy suit, his hair perfectly styled. His signature smug smile was plastered across his face. Right behind him marched Victor Thorne, his high-priced divorce attorney, carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain my entire ruined life. But they were not alone. Trailing behind Donovan, like eager, pathetic shadows, were my mother Sylvia and my sister Madison. I stared at them as they entered. Sylvia and Madison had dressed for the occasion wearing expensive-looking outfits they probably could not afford. They positioned themselves in chairs slightly behind Donovan, forming a unified front of familial betrayal. They had come to watch Donovan secure the $35 million trust so they could get their share. They were here for the payout. Donovan caught my eye and his smirk deepened. He leaned across the polished table, placing his hands flat against the surface. "Stella," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "You look terrible. Have you been sleeping well on your friend's couch? Or are you finally ready to stop this ridiculous charade and come home to your family?" I did not flinch. I did not blink. I stared right back at him, feeling the absolute clarity of someone who holds a loaded gun under the table. "I am exactly where I need to be, Donovan," I replied, my voice completely devoid of emotion. Victor Thorne cleared his throat, dropping his briefcase onto the table. He opened it and pulled out a stack of aggressive legal demands. "Let us skip the pleasantries," Victor announced, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "We are here today to establish clear parameters regarding my client parental rights and the division of marital assets. My client has graciously withdrawn his at-fault divorce petition. He is willing to reconcile. However, given Stella's erratic behavior and refusal to return to the marital home, we have filed an emergency injunction. We demand immediate joint control over all assets, including the recently discovered spendthrift trust established by Harrison." Mitchell leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs. He looked at Victor with an expression of mild amusement. "You are demanding joint control over a trust that explicitly excludes you," Mitchell stated lazily. "That is an incredibly bold legal strategy, Victor. Tell me, how exactly do you plan to bypass a federal spendthrift clause?" Victor sneered, tapping a document. "We are arguing commingling of funds. Stella used a joint account to pay your retainer fee. That makes the entire trust shared marital property. Furthermore, since Donovan is establishing paternity today, he has a legal right to ensure the financial security of his child. He will not allow Stella to mismanage an asset of that magnitude. We are prepared to tie this up in litigation for years if you do not grant him immediate access." Sylvia leaned forward from the back row, her face twisted in a mask of greedy concern. "She needs a man to manage that kind of money, Mr. Adams," she chimed in. "Stella has always been reckless. Donovan is a hedge fund vice president. He knows how to protect wealth. We all agree it is in the best interest of the baby." Madison nodded vigorously beside her. "Exactly. Stella is just being stubborn and emotional right now. She needs her family to help her make the right decisions." The sheer audacity of their performance was nauseating. They were sitting there actively attempting to steal my future under the guise of maternal care and business acumen. They wanted to rip $35 million from my hands and hand it directly to the sociopath who locked me in the rain. I turned my gaze to my mother and sister. "You are here to support a man who had a pregnant mistress living in my house?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You are here to help him steal the money Harrison left to protect me?" Donovan slammed his hand on the table. "Do not try to play the victim here, Stella," he snapped, his facade of the loving husband cracking for a second. "We both know you were hiding that trust from me. You were planning to take my child and run. You think you can outsmart me. You think you can keep $35 million away from me." He leaned closer, his eyes burning with pure, unadulterated greed. "I am the father of that child, Stella." The court-ordered DNA test results arrived this morning. The mediator is bringing the sealed envelope in 5 minutes. The moment that paper confirms my paternity, I am taking joint custody of the baby and I am filing a motion to become the primary trustee of Harrison Estate. You will sign over management rights today, or I will drag you through family court until you are completely bankrupt. I looked at Mitchell. He was perfectly still, a slight smile playing on the edge of his lips. The mediator, a stern-looking woman with gray hair, entered the room carrying a manila envelope. She took her seat at the head of the table. "Good morning," the mediator said, breaking the suffocating tension. "We are here to review the results of the mandatory court-ordered paternity test and discuss the subsequent custody and financial petitions filed by Donovan." Donovan sat back in his chair, adjusting his expensive tie. He looked at my mother and sister, who beamed back at him. They were ready for the slaughter. They thought I was the lamb. They had absolutely no idea that I was the butcher. "Read the results," Donovan commanded, gesturing to the mediator. "Let us make this official so we can get to the money." I folded my hands on the table, my heart beating with cold, steady rhythm. The climax had arrived. The first domino was about to fall, and the chain reaction would completely obliterate every single person sitting across from me. "Read them," I agreed, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "Let us establish exactly who you are, Donovan." The mediator, a woman named Ms. Caldwell, who looked like she had seen every variation of human greed and misery, broke the silence. "We will begin with the results of the court-ordered paternity test," she announced, her voice flat and professional. She picked up the manila envelope, the seal unbroken. "As requested by Mr. Thorne, these results were sent directly from the independent court-appointed facility to this office." Donovan sat forward, his eyes fixed on the envelope. He practically vibrated with anticipation. Sylvia and Madison mirrored his posture, leaning in from the back row, their eyes wide with poorly concealed greed. They looked like dogs waiting for scraps. I kept my gaze steady, my hands resting lightly on the table. Beside me, Mitchell was a statue of composure. Ms. Caldwell broke the seal with a sharp, crisp sound. She slid the document out, adjusting her reading glasses. She scanned the page, her expression unreadable. "The results of the DNA analysis are conclusive," she stated. "The probability of paternity is 99.99%. Donovan, you are confirmed as the biological father of the unborn child." The room erupted. Donovan let out a loud, triumphant laugh, a sound that grated against my nerves. He slapped the table with his palm, turning to Victor Thorne with a wide, arrogant grin. Behind him, Sylvia clapped her hands together, letting out a dramatic sigh of relief. Madison actually squealed, bouncing slightly in her chair. They were celebrating a victory they thought was already won. They were celebrating the capture of $35 million. "I knew it!" Donovan declared, his voice booming with forced vindication. He turned to me, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. "I knew it all along, Stella. The stress, the confusion, it made me doubt everything. But this proves it. This proves we are a family." The sheer hypocrisy was staggering. He had thrown me out in the freezing rain, accused me of infidelity, and filed an at-fault divorce, based entirely on his fabricated sterility. Now faced with absolute proof of his paternity, he was attempting to spin the narrative into a story of a loving, confused husband who just needed reassurance. It was a masterclass in manipulation, but I wasn't buying a single word of it. "This changes everything," Victor Thorne announced, his voice smooth and authoritative. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a new, thick stack of legal documents. "With paternity established, my client has indisputable constitutionally protected rights to this child, and by extension, he has a fiduciary responsibility to ensure the child's financial future is secure." He slid the documents across the table toward Mitchell. "We are prepared to withdraw the emergency injunctions." Victor continued, his tone dripping with false magnanimity. "If Stella signs this agreement, it establishes full joint custody and crucially names Donovan as a co-trustee of the Spendthrift Trust. He is a financial expert after all. It is in the best interest of the child that the assets are managed by someone with his level of market experience." I looked at the documents, then back at Donovan. He was leaning back in his chair, his arms crossed behind his head, the picture of absolute confidence. He thought he had outmaneuvered me. He thought the DNA test was the final nail in my coffin, the irrefutable proof that he had a legal claim to my life and Harrison's money. "You want joint management of the trust," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. It's only fair, Stella, Donovan replied, his tone patronizing. You're pregnant emotional, and you've never managed this kind of capital. I handle hundreds of millions of dollars every day. I know how to protect this money. I know how to make it grow. We'll do this together as a family. Family. I repeated the word, tasting bitter on my tongue. You kicked me out, Donovan. You changed the locks. You emptied my bank accounts. You filed for divorce, claiming I was a cheating whore. I was under immense pressure. Donovan shot back, his facade cracking slightly. I made a mistake, Stella, but the DNA test proves the baby is mine. That means I have rights. You cannot keep me away from my child, and you cannot keep me away from the assets that belong to my child's future. Sign the papers, Stella. Stop being stubborn. We can walk out of here and start over. Sylvia leaned forward again. Listen to him, Stella. He's offering you a way out of this mess. Don't be foolish. Let him manage the money. It's the responsible thing to do. Exactly, Madison chimed in. He's a financial genius. You'd be crazy to turn down his help. I looked at them, my mother and sister openly advocating for my abuser because they wanted a piece of the pie. The betrayal stung, but it also fueled the cold, calculating fire within me. They were all so blinded by greed they couldn't see the trap closing around them. I won't sign those papers, I said, my voice ringing clear and steady in the small room. I will never give you control of Harrison's legacy. Donovan's face darkened, the arrogant smirk replaced by a furious sneer. He leaned across the table, his eyes narrowing. You think you have a choice, Stella. The DNA test is on the record. I am the father. If you don't sign this agreement today, Victor will bury you in litigation. I will fight you for full custody. I will drag you through court until that $35 million is drained by legal fees. You will sign or I will ruin you. The threat hung in the air, heavy and violent. He thought his intimidation tactics would break me. He thought I was alone and desperate. I turned to Mitchell. He had been sitting silently observing the entire exchange with a detached clinical interest. He caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The time had come. The first domino was ready to fall. Mr. Thorne, Mitchell said, his voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. He didn't raise his voice, but the sheer authority in his tone commanded absolute silence. Your client seems to have a very aggressive interpretation of his legal standing. However, his entire strategy is built on a foundation that is fundamentally flawed. Mitchell reached into his own briefcase, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He pulled out a single manila folder. It was thinner than Victor's stack of demands, but it held far more destructive power. You see, Mitchell continued, his eyes locking onto Donovan's. Your client initiated these proceedings with a very specific, very documented claim. He filed an at-fault divorce petition stating that he was sterile. He submitted medical records to this court to support that claim. Donovan swallowed hard, a flicker of unease crossing his face. I withdrew that petition, he said quickly. I explained it was a medical anomaly, a spontaneous recanalization. Yes, Mitchell said, a cold smile touching his lips. You did claim that, but in federal court you cannot simply unring a bell, especially when that bell was rung with forged documents. Mitchell leaned forward, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He placed a single manila folder on the polished conference table directly between himself and Victor Thorne. The silence in the room stretched, becoming thick and suffocating. Donovan crossed his arms, a sneer curling his lip. You think a single folder is going to stop me from claiming what is rightfully mine? The DNA test is conclusive, Mitchell. I am the father. That means I have parental rights, and I have a right to ensure my child's financial future is protected from a woman who clearly cannot handle it. Victor Thorne nodded gravely, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. My client is simply exercising his legal rights under federal law. We are prepared to tie up the Spendthrift Trust in litigation for years if you do not grant him immediate co-trustee status. Mitchell did not raise his voice, but his tone was absolute ice. You seem to be under the impression, Victor, that your client operates from a position of legal strength. He does not. He operates from a position of profound arrogance and monumental stupidity. Mitchell opened the manila folder. He pulled out a stack of documents, each one marked with official court seals and federal subpoena stamps. He slid the first document across the table toward Victor. "Let us start with the foundation of your initial legal strategy." Mitchell began, his voice smooth and deadly. "A few weeks ago, your client filed an at-fault divorce petition. In that petition, he formally accused Stella of infidelity. To substantiate this claim, he submitted medical documentation under oath. He swore before a federal judge that he was completely sterile, having undergone a vasectomy 3 years prior." Donovan scoffed, rolling his eyes. "I already explained that to the court. It was a medical anomaly, a spontaneous recanalization. It happens. My urologist confirmed it." Mitchell smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. "Yes, you claimed it was an anomaly. But there is a significant difference between a medical anomaly and medical fraud, Donovan. I took the liberty of investigating the clinic you listed on those documents." He slid the next set of papers across the table. "These are the subpoenaed intake logs, surgical schedules, and billing reports from the holding company that previously owned that clinic. The clinic itself was quietly dissolved 2 years ago. The presiding surgeon lost his medical license due to malpractice and unethical billing practices." Victor Thorne frowned, leaning forward to examine the documents. His eyes scanned the pages rapidly. "According to these official federal records," Mitchell continued, his voice dropping to a harsh, commanding cadence, "Donovan was never a patient at that facility. His name does not appear on any intake form. There is no record of pre-operative blood work. There is absolutely no record of him ever stepping foot inside an operating room during the month he claimed the procedure took place." Donovan face drained of color. He sat frozen, his arrogant sneer vanishing instantly. Sylvia and Madison shifted uncomfortably behind him, suddenly sensing that the tide was turning against them. "What I did find, however," Mitchell said, pulling the final document from the folder, "is a rather interesting financial transaction. $10,000 wired from Donovan's personal account to the disgraced physician private account, coded as a premium consultation fee." Mitchell leaned back, crossing his arms. "He bought a blank template, Victor. He paid $10,000 to a black market doctor to fabricate a post-operative report complete with a fraudulent signature and a falsified 0% sperm count analysis. He then submitted that fabricated document to a federal judge under penalty of perjury." The silence in the room was absolute. Victor Thorne stared at the documents, his face unreadable. He slowly took off his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Submitting falsified medical records to influence a divorce proceeding and secure an at-fault ruling is not a minor infraction," Donovan Mitchell stated, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "It is a severe federal offense. It is felony perjury. You willfully manufactured evidence to manipulate the court system. You lied to a federal judge." Donovan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a cliff and suddenly realized there was no ground beneath him. The reality of his situation crashed over him. He was not the apex predator. He was the prey, and the trap had just snapped shut. "Victor, this is ridiculous." Donovan finally managed, his voice cracking. "Do not listen to him. It is a bluff. They cannot prove any of this." Victor Thorne did not look at him. He slowly, carefully placed the documents back onto the table. "Mitchell," he said, his voice tight, "is this information currently on the public record?" "It will be," Mitchell replied smoothly. "I am filing the formal complaint with the district attorney office this afternoon. However, I thought it prudent to inform you during this mediation so you fully understand the consequences of your client's current legal posture." Victor slowly turned his head to look at Donovan. The shark-like aggression was completely gone, replaced by a cold, professional fury. "You lied to me," he stated, his voice low and dangerous. "You provided me with fraudulent documentation and allowed me to submit it to the court under my name." "I was desperate," Donovan pleaded, his panic escalating. "She was trying to trap me with that baby. I needed an out. I didn't think they would actually check the clinic records." "You arrogant fool," Victor hissed, leaning closer to Donovan. "You just exposed my firm to disbarment proceedings. You used me to commit a federal crime." Donovan looked around the room, his eyes wide with terror. He looked at Sylvia and Madison, who were shrinking back into their chairs, their dreams of $35 million evaporating before their eyes. He looked at me, but I offered him no sympathy. I sat perfectly still, watching the man who threw me into the freezing rain watch his entire life crumble. "This changes everything," Victor announced, standing up abruptly. He snapped his briefcase shut with a sharp, definitive click. "As of this moment, I am withdrawing as your legal counsel, Donovan. I will formally notify the court within the hour. I strongly advise you to find criminal defense representation immediately. You are going to need it." Victor Thorne turned and marched out of the mediation room, the heavy double doors slamming shut behind him. Donovan sat alone, his high-priced lawyer gone, his arrogant facade completely shattered. He stared at the documents on the table, the irrefutable proof of his felony perjury. He was facing federal prison, and he knew it. The first domino had fallen, and the destruction was total. The heavy double doors slamming shut behind Victor Thorne echoed like a gunshot in the sterile mediation room. Donovan sat completely paralyzed, his high-priced divorce attorney gone, his arrogant facade shattered into pieces. He stared at the documents on the table, the irrefutable proof of his felony perjury. He was facing federal prison, and he knew it. The first domino had fallen, and the destruction was absolute. But I was not finished. Sylvia and Madison shifted uneasily in their chairs behind him. The sudden departure of the aggressive legal shark had rattled their greedy confidence. They looked at Donovan, expecting him to fix the situation, to pull some miraculous hedge fund maneuver out of thin air to secure their $35 million payday. "Donovan, my mother," Sylvia stammered, her voice tight with rising panic. "What is going on? Call him back. We need him to get the trust." I did not give Donovan a chance to answer. I reached into my leather tote bag and pulled out the second folder. It was exponentially thicker than the first. It was the complete forensic accounting dossier Carmen had meticulously compiled over the last 48 hours. I dropped it onto the polished mahogany table with a heavy thud. "Your lawyer ran away because he recognized a sinking ship," I said, my voice slicing through the heavy tension. "He realized that participating in this mediation would make him an accessory to a federal crime. But the perjury trap was just the warm-up, Donovan. I want you to pay very close attention to this next part. I want you to understand exactly how deeply we vivisected your entire financial ecosystem." Donovan swallowed hard, a bead of sweat tracing its way down his temple. He looked at the thick dossier like it was a live explosive. I slid the heavy file across the smooth surface of the table until it rested directly in front of his shaking hands. "Go ahead and open it," I commanded. "Let us talk about the $500,000 you so generously invested into Madison, failing virtual fashion startup last week." Madison sat up straight, her eyes darting between me and the folder. "That was a legitimate angel investment." She snapped, her tone defensive. "Donovan believes in my vision. He used his executive bonuses to fund my company." I let out a harsh, dry laugh. "He does not have executive bonuses, Madison. He is a fraud living paycheck to paycheck on maxed-out corporate credit to maintain the illusion of wealth." I turned my gaze back to the terrified man sitting across from me. "Mitchell, please explain to my sister exactly where her supposed angel investment originated." Mitchell leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. His voice was clinical and devastating. "My forensic accountant traced the exact routing of that $500,000, Madison. Donovan authorized a margin call on a client retirement portfolio he personally manages. He manipulated the loss report and skimmed $500,000 directly from his own clients. He routed that stolen capital through a Delaware shell corporation named Apex Ventures before depositing it into your startup account." Sylvia gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. Madison's face drained of all color, her jaw dropping open. "That is a lie." Donovan croaked, his voice barely a whisper. His hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. "You cannot prove any of that. The routing numbers are encrypted." "Carmen used to hunt shell corporations for the federal government," I stated coldly. "She cracked your amateur encryption in less than 20 minutes. But we did not stop at Madison's startup. We kept following the bloody money, Donovan. We kept digging until we found Courtney." Donovan flinched as if I had struck him across the face. I opened my own copy of the dossier and read directly from the highlighted page. 2 weeks ago, you authorized another massive outgoing wire transfer from that exact same manipulated client portfolio. You routed $200,000 through a secondary shell company and sent it directly to a luxury real estate escrow account. You stole $200,000 from your hedge fund clients to secure a lavish secret townhouse for your pregnant mistress. You financed your entire double life with stolen capital. The mediation room was suffocatingly silent. Ms. Caldwell, the mediator, sat frozen at the head of the table, her eyes wide with shock as the magnitude of the financial crimes was laid bare. You are bleeding your clients dry to cover your tracks, I continued, my voice relentless and steady. You stole the life savings of hard-working people to bribe my mother and sister so they would help you trap me. You threw me into the freezing rain and canceled my bank accounts while you were actively embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars. Madison stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. Donovan, she yelled, her voice shrill with terror. Tell me she is lying. Tell me that money is clean. If I accept stolen funds, the government will seize my entire company. Donovan could not look at her. He stared blankly at the forensic accounting report, his chest heaving as he struggled to breathe. He was completely trapped. Mitchell delivered the final crushing blow. He checked his heavy silver watch and smiled a dark, satisfied smile. It is exactly 10:15 in the morning. 2 hours ago, my office formally submitted this entire forensic audit to the Securities and Exchange Commission. We also dispatched a copy directly to the Financial Crimes Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Donovan let out a strangled sound, grabbing his chest. They are not just going to audit you, Donovan, Mitchell explained, his tone devoid of any mercy. The federal agents are likely raiding your hedge fund office right at this very second. They are seizing your servers, freezing your assets, and locking down your entire building. By the time you walk out of this courthouse today, there will be a federal warrant out for your arrest. Sylvia collapsed back into her chair, weeping hysterically. Madison began pacing the back of the room, pulling at her hair, her dreams of a tech empire completely vaporized. They had abandoned me to align themselves with a wealthy savior. Now they realized their savior was a federal criminal who had just implicated them in a massive money laundering scheme. You destroyed me, Donovan whispered, a single tear leaking from his eye. You took everything. I leaned across the table, looking him directly in the eyes. I did not destroy you, Donovan. You destroyed yourself the moment you decided my life was yours to ruin. I just handed the government the shovel you used to dig your own grave. The shockwave of Mitchell's announcement reverberated through the room, pinning Donovan to his chair. He was no longer a hedge fund vice president commanding respect and demanding assets. He was a cornered criminal realizing the trap had closed around him entirely. The silence was absolute, broken only by the ragged, shallow breathing of my mother and sister behind him. They had come to feast on my inheritance, and now they were chained to a man about to face a federal indictment. I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the table, my voice carrying the steady, cold weight of absolute victory. You wanted the DNA test, Donovan. You demanded it. You wanted the court to formally recognize you as the father of this child. Donovan stared at me, his eyes wide and vacant. I just wanted my family back. He croaked, the lie sounding pathetic even to him. You wanted $35 million, I corrected sharply. And in your greedy rush to claim it, you legally established paternity. Do you understand what that means in family court? It means you are legally obligated to pay child support. He blinked, confusion momentarily piercing his panic. Child support, Stella. My assets are being frozen by the FBI. I'm going to be bankrupt. I can't pay child support. That is exactly the point, Mitchell interjected, his tone ringing with finality. Child support is a non-dischargeable debt in bankruptcy, Donovan. The court will impute your income based on your previous earning capacity as a hedge fund VP. Even while you sit in federal prison, that debt will accumulate. You will emerge from a decade behind bars, owing hundreds of thousands of dollars in arrears. You will be garnished, your future wages seized, and your credit ruined permanently. You dug a financial grave that you will never climb out of. Donovan slumped forward, his head resting in his hands. The immaculate suit he wore suddenly looked like a straitjacket. "The trust," he muttered, his voice muffled by his hands. "I have a right to the trust. If I'm the father, the money belongs to my child. I should have a say." Mitchell laughed, a brief, sharp sound devoid of any humor. "Ah, the trust. Let's address Victor Thorne's desperate, commingling argument, shall we?" Mitchell opened another folder, this one remarkably thin, containing only a few heavily stamped pages. Victor attempted to argue that Stella paying a $500 administrative fee from a joint account transformed a $35 million portfolio into marital property. He slid the documents across the table. Donovan didn't even look up. What Victor deliberately ignored, or was too incompetent to understand, is the explicit language of Harrison's spendthrift clause. Mitchell continued, his voice ringing with the clarity of a judge passing sentence. "The clause dictates that the principal and income of the trust are absolutely shielded from alienation, anticipation, or attachment. It means the funds cannot be seized by creditors, they cannot be claimed in civil suits, and they absolutely cannot be classified as marital assets under any state or federal jurisdiction." I watched my mother Sylvia clutch her designer purse, her face pale. She finally understood. The money was untouchable. "Even if Stella had paid for the entire trust administration with your credit card," Mitchell said, driving the final nail into the coffin, "it wouldn't matter. The trust is a separate, impenetrable legal entity. The moment you filed for divorce, you severed any theoretical claim you might have hallucinated you possessed. You get nothing, Donovan, not a single cent." Donovan raised his head, his face contorted in a mix of fury and despair. "She planned this," he hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She set me up." "I set you up?" I asked, my voice rising, the anger I had suppressed for weeks finally breaking through. "Did I force you to pay a black market doctor for a fake vasectomy? Did I force you to embezzle $500,000 to buy my mother's loyalty? Did I force you to steal client funds to house your pregnant mistress?" I stood up, pushing my chair back. "You set yourself up, Donovan. You looked at my grief over Harrison and saw an opportunity. You looked at my desire for a family and saw a weakness. You thought you could use me, drain me, and discard me when you were done." I walked around the table, standing directly over him. "Harrison knew exactly what you were. He built this trust not just to provide for his child, but to protect me from parasites like you. And he was right." Sylvia suddenly stood up, her face a mask of panicked desperation. "Stella, please," she begged, reaching a hand toward me. "We didn't know about the embezzlement. Madison and I had no idea the money was stolen. We were just trying to protect the family. You have to believe us." Madison nodded frantically beside her, tears welling in her eyes. "Stella, my company is ruined if the FBI seizes that money. I'll be bankrupt. You have to help us. You have $35 million. You can fix this." I looked at my mother and sister, the same women who had slammed a door in my face when I was pregnant, freezing, and homeless. The same women who had eagerly accepted stolen money to betray me. "Help you?" I asked, my voice dropping to a cold, flat register. "You made your choice, Mom. You chose the man with the money. It's not my fault you picked a criminal." "Stella, you can't just leave us like this," Sylvia pleaded, her voice cracking. "We're your family." "My family," I echoed, the word tasting like ash. "My family is the man who gave me the keys to a studio apartment when you locked me out. Jamal is my family. My baby is my family. You two are just people I used to know." I turned back to Donovan. He was staring at the table, a broken, ruined man. "The mediation is over," I announced, looking at Ms. Caldwell, who nodded silently. "My attorney will send the final divorce decree. You will sign it, or we will see you in criminal court." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of the mediation room, Mitchell right behind me. The heavy doors closed on the sobbing of my mother, the frantic pleading of my sister, and the silent, absolute ruin of the man who thought he could destroy me. The air outside the courthouse was crisp and clear. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the last few weeks lift from my shoulders. The shark was caged, the vultures were starving, and I was finally free. The air outside the courthouse was crisp and clear. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the last few weeks lift from my shoulders. The shark was caged, the vultures were starving, and I was finally free. My freedom marked the exact beginning of my family's absolute destruction. The federal authorities moved with a speed that left no room for escape. The moment the Securities and Exchange Commission confirmed the origin of the funds Donovan wired to Apex Ventures, the FBI descended upon Madison's startup. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Madison was hosting a launch party at her leased downtown office, popping champagne and bragging about her brilliant investor. Federal agents wearing tactical vests walked straight through the glass doors. They immediately seized her servers, confiscated the hard drives, and froze every bank account tied to her name. Because she had knowingly accepted funds from an unverified shell corporation, she was legally entangled in Donovan's massive embezzlement scheme. The Internal Revenue Service hit her with a devastating audit, freezing her personal assets pending a federal investigation. Her empire evaporated before lunch. The financial contagion spread directly to my mother. Sylvia had been so blinded by the promise of Donovan's dirty money that she had taken out a massive second mortgage on her suburban home to help Madison secure the expensive commercial lease. She was certain the startup would yield millions. Now, with the startup accounts frozen by the government, the bank immediately called in the loans. Sylvia and Madison were suddenly staring down catastrophic bankruptcy. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings, giving her less than 30 days to vacate. The luxurious lifestyle my mother worshipped was annihilated. They had traded their pregnant daughter for $500,000 of stolen money, and the universe returned the favor by stripping them of everything. 2 weeks after the mediation, I was sitting in the quiet luxury of my new penthouse apartment overlooking the Seattle skyline. My encrypted phone was deactivated, and I was back on my regular cellular network. My screen lit up with an incoming call from Sylvia. I let it ring. A minute later, a frantic text message arrived. "Stella, please answer the phone. We are losing the house. The FBI took everything from Madison. We know you have the trust fund now. Please, you have to help us." I stared at the message, feeling absolutely nothing. No pity, no guilt, just a profound echoing emptiness where my familial love used to be. Then my phone rang again. This time it was a video call from Madison. I decided to answer it. I wanted to look them in the eyes one last time. I propped the phone against my laptop. The screen connected, revealing my mother and sister huddled together in Sylvia's living room. The background was filled with half-packed cardboard boxes. Madison looked completely unhinged. Her designer clothes were rumpled. Her hair was a mess, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Sylvia looked 10 years older, her face pale. "Stella, thank God," Sylvia gasped, leaning into the camera. "We are in a living nightmare. The government froze Madison accounts. The bank is taking my house next week. We have nothing left. You need to wire us some money." "Stella," Madison pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. "You have $35 million. If you just give us $1 million, we can pay off the bank and hire a defense lawyer. $1 million is nothing to you now. You will not even miss it. Please, Stella, we are your family." I sat back, resting my hands on my lap. I looked at the two women who had slammed a door in my face when I was shivering in the freezing rain. "You are not my family," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "You are the people who locked me out when I was pregnant and homeless. You are the people who told me to sign a divorce paper giving a sociopath all my assets just so you could keep your stolen investment money." "We made a terrible mistake," Sylvia sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "Donovan manipulated us. He lied to us." "He bought you," I corrected sharply. "He put a price tag on my safety, and you eagerly accepted it. You did not care that he had a pregnant mistress. You did not care that I was sleeping on a cot above a restaurant. You only cared about funding a ridiculous virtual fashion company. You chose his money over my life." "Stella, please," Madison begged, pressing her hands together. "I will do anything. I will publicly apologize. I will sign a contract saying I will pay you back every cent. Just please do not let them take Mom House. Do not let me go to jail." I leaned closer to the camera, ensuring they could see the absolute lack of mercy in my eyes. When I stood on your porch begging for a place to sleep, you told me I was a disgrace. You told me I brought it on myself. Now you are facing federal investigations and homelessness because of your own greed. You brought this on yourselves. Stella, you cannot do this, Sylvia wailed, reaching toward the screen. You have millions. You can save us with a single phone call. I said softly. But I will not. Enjoy the consequences of your investment, Mom. I reached out and tapped the red button ending the call. The screen went black, cutting off their frantic sobbing. I slowly opened my contact list and blocked both their numbers. I deleted their contact information, erasing them from my digital life, just as thoroughly as they had erased me from their physical one. I set the phone face down on the table. The silence in the penthouse was beautiful. The toxic noise of my past was permanently silenced, leaving only the peaceful promise of my future. 6 months later, the harsh Seattle winter yielded to a bright, vibrant spring. I stood on the glass balcony of my downtown penthouse, holding my newborn son in my arms. The morning air was crisp and smelled of blooming rain, washed pine. I wrapped his soft blue blanket tighter around his tiny shoulders. He was perfect. He had Harrison, dark eyes and a quiet, calm demeanor. He was the living, breathing key that unlocked our future. But more importantly, he was my absolute greatest joy. Every time I looked at him, I felt an overwhelming sense of profound gratitude. I looked down at his sleeping face, feeling a surge of protective love that eclipsed any darkness from my past. The nightmare was completely over. We were finally perfectly and completely safe together. The legal bloodbath we orchestrated concluded with terrifying efficiency. Donovan's arrogant empire collapsed faster than anyone could have predicted. The federal prosecutors did not offer him a plea deal. They took him to trial and presented the mountain of forensic evidence Carmen meticulously compiled. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before delivering a guilty verdict. Donovan is currently serving a 10-year sentence in a minimum security federal prison. The judge stripped him of his financial licenses, seized his remaining legitimate assets to pay back his defrauded clients, and activated the child support order based on his previous massive hedge fund salary. He sits in a concrete cell, accumulating a massive, insurmountable debt he will never be able to repay. He wanted to claim my child to control my wealth, but instead he secured his own permanent financial ruin. As for his pregnant mistress, Courtney, she proved to be exactly the kind of opportunist Donovan truly deserved. The moment the FBI raided his office, she packed her bags, emptied his secret emergency safe of whatever cash remained, and vanished without a trace. She did not attend a single day of his trial. She abandoned him, the exact same cruel way he abandoned me, leaving him with absolutely nothing but the crushing reality of his choices. My mother and sister faded into the obscure struggles they brought upon themselves entirely. The bank foreclosed on Sylvia House shortly after our final video call. Madison's startup was completely liquidated by federal auditors investigating the stolen hedge fund money. She blindly accepted. I heard through the legal grapevine that they moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a neighboring state, struggling to make ends meet. They never tried to contact me again. The absolute boundary I established held firm. They realized the wealthy daughter they tried to exploit was completely untouchable. They traded everything for a lie and inherited nothing but a lifetime of bitter, profound regret. I shifted my baby to my other shoulder and looked over the glass railing toward the bustling city streets far below. Several blocks away, a crowd was gathering outside a beautiful, newly renovated brick building. I watched as Jamal stepped out onto the sidewalk, wearing a crisp white chef coat. He was holding a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors. He smiled broadly, shaking hands with the local mayor and waving to the cheering crowd. It was the grand opening of his third upscale restaurant. When Sylvia and Madison lost everything, Jamal finally filed for divorce. He refused to be dragged down by their toxic greed. He walked away with his integrity intact, but his restaurant expansion plans were stalled. He needed capital to secure the new lease. A month later, he received an email from an anonymous angel investor offering full funding with incredibly generous terms. Jamal had no idea that the silent backer who wired him the capital was the same woman he saved from freezing in an alleyway 6 months ago. He handed me a brass key and $20 bills when I had absolutely nothing. I handed him the keys to his culinary empire. It was simply the best investment I ever made. I turned away from the city view and walked back inside the penthouse. The space was filled with warm, natural light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I had decorated it myself, choosing pieces that brought me peace and joy. There were no ghosts of past toxic relationships here. There were no manipulative voices telling me I was a failure or a disappointment. There was only the quiet, steady hum of a life I built entirely on my own terms. I walked into the nursery and gently placed my son into his crib. I watched his chest rise and fall with steady, rhythmic breathing. Harrison gave us the ultimate shield, but I had to find the courage to wield it properly. I had to walk through the freezing rain, face the absolute worst of human betrayal, and stand firm against people who wanted to destroy me. I did not just survive. Donovan cruelty or my family toxic greed, I completely dismantled them piece by piece. I took the broken remnants of my life and forged an unbreakable fortress. I walked into my home office and sat behind my desk. I opened my laptop to review the latest financial reports from the Spendthrift Trust. The portfolio was thriving, growing stronger every single day, under Mitchell expert legal guidance. I was 33 years old. I was the mother of a beautiful, healthy baby boy. I possessed $35 million in secure, protected assets. I was a wealthy, fiercely independent woman. I took a deep breath, letting the perfect silence wash over me. The battles were won, the enemies were vanquished, and the future was a brilliant, unwritten canvas waiting for my personal touch. But as I looked around the beautiful, peaceful sanctuary I called home, I realized the greatest victory was not the massive wealth or the total revenge. The greatest victory was looking in the mirror and knowing nobody could ever manipulate, control, or diminish me again. I was finally and absolutely free forever. The story of Stella's harrowing betrayal and triumphant rebirth offers a profound lesson on the absolute necessity of establishing impenetrable boundaries. Her journey vividly illustrates that a marriage certificate or shared blood does not inherently guarantee loyalty, love, or respect. For years, Stella operated under the illusion that her devotion and financial contributions would eventually earn the genuine affection of her husband and her family. Instead, her compliance only made her a convenient target for their relentless greed and manipulation. The critical turning point in this narrative occurs when Stella consciously decides to stop seeking validation from people who view her merely as an exploitable resource. When toxic individuals show you their true character, whether by locking you out in a freezing rainstorm or by eagerly accepting embezzled money to fund their own vanity, you must believe them without hesitation. Stella's ultimate victory was not watching Donovan get sentenced to federal prison, nor was it seeing her mother and sister face catastrophic bankruptcy. Her truest triumph was the profound inner peace she achieved by completely severing those toxic ties. She teaches us that we are not obligated to offer second chances to those who systematically plot our destruction. True wealth is not found in a multi-million-dollar trust fund, but in the absolute freedom to curate your own environment and surround yourself only with people who offer unconditional support like Jamal. Healing truly begins the exact moment we stop trying to fix broken people and start aggressively protecting our own peace. We must all find the courage to walk away from tables where respect is no longer being served. If you have ever found strength in walking away from a toxic relationship, please share your boundary-setting victories in the comments below and hit subscribe to join our community of resilience.